We all know the story of September 11th, 2001. It's a day forever marked in history. The official story, the one we are told in schools and in the news, says that a group of 19 terrorists, led by Osama bin Laden, hijacked 4 airplanes. They flew 2 into the World Trade Center towers in New York, 1 into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and the 4th crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after brave passengers fought back. This story is presented as complete. The case is closed. But for thousands of architects, engineers, pilots, physicists, and former government officials around the world, this story has giant holes. The evidence left behind at the crash sites tells a more complicated and disturbing story, one that raises serious questions about what truly happened that day. This is not about spreading fear. This is about looking at evidence that doesn't fit, listening to witnesses who were ignored, and asking questions that deserve clear answers. This is an exploration of the unanswered questions of 9/11. Chapter 1. The impossible collapse of World Trade Center Building 7. Most people remember the 2 tall twin towers falling, but few remember the 3rd giant skyscraper that fell that same afternoon. World Trade Center Building 7, or WTC 7. This was not a small building. It was 47 stories tall, and it fell at 5:20 p.m., nearly 7 hours after the North Tower collapsed. The first question is simple. Why did it fall? It was not hit by an airplane. Television news reports that afternoon showed the building with what appeared to be limited fires on a few floors. From the outside, it did not look like a building that was about to collapse completely. And yet, it did. And it didn't just fall over, it fell straight down into its own footprint in less than 7 seconds. This is a key point. This is exactly how professional demolition crews tear down buildings. They use carefully placed explosives to cut the main support columns at the same time, allowing the building to drop straight down in a controlled manner. This is called controlled demolition. The official explanation came from a government agency called the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. After a very long investigation, they concluded that fires fed by diesel fuel from generators in the building caused a collapse. They said the heat from these fires weakened the steel columns, causing one to fail and then the whole building to come down. But this explanation has massive problems. It's never happened before or since. In all of history, no steel frame skyscraper has ever completely collapsed due to fire alone. Those buildings were badly damaged, but they did not collapse. Why was WTC 7 the only one? The speed of the collapse. The building fell at nearly free fall speed. This means that the lower floors, the ones that were supposedly still strong, offered no resistance to the falling building above. The only way this can happen is if those supporting structures were suddenly removed at the same time, as if by explosives. The sounds of explosions. Numerous first responders, firefighters, and journalists on the scene reported hearing loud explosions coming from inside WTC 7 throughout the afternoon. Barry Jennings, a city official inside the building that morning, gave a dramatic interview describing powerful explosions that rocked the building's lobby, trapping him inside. Because of these issues, a group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has gathered over 3,000 professional signatures from licensed architects and structural engineers. These experts have reviewed the evidence and concluded that the official story is physically impossible. They state, based on the laws of physics, that the building shows all the signs of a controlled demolition. Chapter 2. The baffling attack on the Pentagon. The attack on the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. military, is the heart of the official story. Yet, the physical evidence here is perhaps the most confusing of all. The official story says that American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757, hit the Pentagon. But the physical damage does not clearly match this story. The hole in the wall, the hole made in the Pentagon's reinforced concrete wall, was only about 16 to 18 feet wide. A Boeing 757 is a massive plane. Its wingspan is 125 feet from tip to tip, and its tail stands 44 feet tall. If such a large plane had hit the building, the damage should have been much wider and taller.
Expanded our understanding of just how vast the potential was for this to affect everyone in America.
The hole seems too small. There is no clear damage on the building's facade from the wings or the tail. The lack of debris. Where is the plane? The official report says the plane was vaporized by the impact. But this is not how plane crashes work. Airplanes are not made of paper. They're made of strong metals, engines, and other heavy parts that do not simply disappear. The two engines, in particular, are made of extremely tough steel and are almost always found largely intact after a crash. At the Pentagon, the debris field was remarkably small. There were no large, recognizable pieces of the plane, no wings, no tail section, no rows of seats, visible in the immediate aftermath. The missing video footage. This is one of the biggest mysteries. The Pentagon is one of the most heavily guarded buildings in the world. It is surrounded by security cameras. Immediately after the attack, the FBI seized all of this video footage. To this day, they have only released 5 very grainy frames from one camera, which show a blurry object but no clear details of an airplane. If a 757 really did hit the Pentagon, showing the clear video evidence would end all doubts instantly. The refusal to release this evidence has fueled suspicion for over 20 years. These facts have led to many alternative theories. Some researchers suggest a smaller aircraft or a missile might have hit the building. Others believe the plane was redirected. The point is that the official evidence provided does not convincingly show a large passenger jet causing the damage we see. Chapter 3. The Twin Towers, Squibs, Molten Metal, and Unexplained Heat. Even the collapse of the Twin Towers themselves has features that experts find strange. Squibs, or demolition-like explosions. If you watch videos of the towers collapsing in slow motion, you can see something fascinating. Seconds before the collapsing floors reach them, windows on lower floors suddenly burst outward, ejecting dust and debris horizontally in all directions. Explosives experts call these squibs. In a controlled demolition, these are caused by explosives cutting the support columns inside the building, and they always happen ahead of the visible collapse. If the towers were falling because the top was crushing the bottom, a pancake collapse, these explosive ejections from the sides of lower floors would be impossible. The force would be traveling downward, not sideways out the windows. The mystery of the molten metal. For weeks after September 11th, rescue workers, engineers, and journalists reported seeing pools of molten metal, glowing, liquid hot metal, in the underground wreckage of the Twin Towers. The problem is one of simple science. The fires in the buildings, fueled by jet fuel and office furniture, burned at a maximum of about 1,500 to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But steel, which the buildings were made of, must reach about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit to melt. So how was this metal getting hot enough to turn into liquid? Where was this extreme, sustained heat coming from? Jet fuel and office fires cannot explain it. The active thermitic material discovery. This is perhaps the most scientific and damning piece of evidence. In 2009, a team of scientists, led by Dr. Niels Harrit from the University of Copenhagen, published a study in a scientific journal called the Open Chemical Physics Journal. They had studied dust samples from the World Trade Center site. They announced they had found tiny, unreacted chips of active thermitic material in the dust. Thermite is a high-temperature incendiary material. When ignited, it creates an extremely intense heat wave that can quickly cut through steel. It is used in military operations and, interestingly, in controlled demolitions to cut through large steel columns. The presence of unignited thermite in the dust suggests that this material was placed in the buildings before they fell. Chapter 4. The historical precedent and the question of motive. All these questions lead to one final, giant question. Why? If the official story is not completely true, what could be another reason? This is where we look at motive and history. The 9/11 attacks led directly to several huge changes. The War on Terror. The U.S. immediately invaded Afghanistan and later Iraq. New laws. The USA Patriot Act was passed, giving the government vast new powers to spy on its own citizens without a warrant. A new security state. The Department of Homeland Security was created, leading to a massive new security and surveillance system. The The question is, who benefited? Many point to leaders in government who wanted to go to war in the Middle East, or to companies that would make billions from these wars and new security contracts. And there's a historical precedent that shows this is not a crazy idea. In 1962, the U.S. Military Joint Chiefs of Staff approved a plan called Operation Northwoods. This was a secret plan to commit acts of terrorism against American citizens and military bases and blame it on Cuba. The idea was to create public anger and get support for a war against Cuba. President John F. Kennedy rejected the plan, but it proves that the highest levels of the U.S. government have seriously considered staging attacks to trick the public into supporting a war. Conclusion: the need for a new investigation. The official investigation, the 9/11 Commission, has been heavily criticized. The Commission's own leaders, Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton, said they were set up to fail. They said they were denied critical funding and access to key people and information. They felt that officials from the Pentagon and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, lied to them. The questions raised by the evidence, the controlled demolition of WTC-7, the physical anomalies at the Pentagon, the molten metal and thermitic material in the towers, have never been properly answered by the government. Because of this, millions of people around the world believe the true story of 9/11 has not been told. They are not conspiracy theorists, they're truth seekers. They are calling for a new, truly independent investigation that has the power to subpoena evidence, hear from all witnesses, and finally explain the facts that do not fit the official story. Until that happens, the questions of September 11th will remain open, a painful and unresolved wound in the heart of America. The search for truth is not an attack on the victims or their families. It is the highest form of respect for them. It is a demand for answers, for accountability, and for a true understanding of the day that changed the world forever.